around is the clouds. But another time you play the game, this is what you would have seen. You would have been flying over Lake Powell. You might have also noticed that the green pilot, the pilot with the green helmet, it says Davis on it. That was me in there as well. But the voice was not mine. I did the voice of White Knight. This was the third possibility for the start. Let me just let it. So this is that was San Francisco. So you had three choices. Yeah, I did the voice of White Knight, but I was physically the guy wearing the green helmet. And then the next thing I'm going to show you is an example of how the story parts, which happened at the beginning, the first level there was not much of a story, but then you would get into something like this.
And Quicksilver report similar sightings in their areas.
You got anything on radar?
Milford is jammed.
Notify headquarters. Sky Blue is under attack.
I'm right behind him, Big Daddy. They
So-
almost got me, but I outmaneuvered him.
And then you would go into the level, and you'd play like this. But alternatively, you might see this.
There are UFOs everywhere. I don't know how long I can hold them off. We're right over the desert in Sector 5. I hope there's nobody down there.
So just again, another example of the variation. In one case it was farmland, in another case it was desert. In one case you have the guy saying sky blue, in the other case you have the woman saying sky blue. Sorry, let's see what's next here. Okay. So let me go back to the photo. So another place we shot. So once we basically let the guys who were shooting in California, we let them do their thing. But we were based in Chicago, and we also wanted to get Chicago in there. It was our base, and we found a cameraman who was a Steadicam operator. Now I don't know if you guys know what a Steadicam is, but Steadicams were very new back then. They had just been invented, or very recently been invented. There were not a lot of people who knew how to operate a Steadicam. But we found the one guy in Chicago who could operate a Steadicam, and we hired him to shoot our footage. And there were two different things we shot in Chicago. One of them was out of this we shot flying footage out of this helicopter, which was terrifying. I was in that helicopter. He was leaning out the side. You can see how the side of the helicopter is open. That's how we flew. He was strapped in and leaning out the side of the helicopter. Here's the camera, and he was behind it. This was also one of the coldest days in record. This was one of the coldest winters in Chicago's history. And it was about 26 degrees below zero with the wind chill. And there's the camera hanging off the side of the helicopter. And that's him. That's where he sat while we were flying. This guy was amazing. I wish I remembered his last name. His first name was Greg. But, he was absolutely fearless. And this is some of the flying. Now, I took still pictures while we were flying because I just love Chicago. It's a beautiful city. Anybody know Chicago? Is anybody from Chicago or been there? You might, maybe, okay, then you probably wouldn't appreciate it, but there was a thing along the lakeshore in Chicago called the S-curve that everybody dreaded. And this was the S-curve. It was a 90-degree turn on this highway. They have since completely redone this highway so there's no severe curve, but I got a picture of it before they tore it down. This is my neighborhood. This is my house. We flew over my house. I had to get a picture of it. It's that yellow house right there. Okay, and now this is in Kalamazoo. So there were two things we shot with this guy, Greg. One was the aerial footage from the helicopter, and the other thing was forest footage of trees. Because we had built into our game a level that was very reminiscent of the scene in The Empire Strikes Back, Revenge of the Jedi, Return of the Jedi, where the plane, or their scooters, are flying through the forest. So that movie had just come out, it was very popular, we're like, we got to do something like that. So we hired the Steadicam operator. Somebody knew of this field of trees in Kalamazoo that are planted very orderly. So again, in the middle of winter, we traipsed on out to Kalamazoo for a couple of days. And this is where we were, if anybody wants to go visit it, the El Sabo Land Preserve. We had our gear, we had our Steadicam, We had a crew. By the way, this is a guy standing right back here. His name is Dave Faust, and he was also a contributor to the design and was part of the entire process of making the game. He was one of our guys. This is Greg over here getting suited up. So here's what the forest looked like. In certain angles, depending really on your angle, the trees were planted in rows. But if, depending on the angle you stood at, it might look like that or it might look like that. And there he was. He was basically just walking with the Steadicam. Sometimes we tried to put the camera was mounted on the bottom of the Steadicam to get a sort of severe, closer to the ground look. But he was just either walking or running through the trees. Some more Steadicam. For some shots, he was sitting on the front of our little truck, and we were driving with him sitting there. He's literally tied in there with a rope. And this is us back at our hotel room. Now, we had film footage that he had shot, and he wanted to see it. Now, in the film industry, they're called dailies. And if you're living in Los Angeles, it's real simple. You just send your film to the lab, they process it, you get it back, I don't know, the same day or the next day, and you go to a screening room at your studio and you watch the dailies. Well, we're in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We don't have a place to watch a movie, we don't have a lab. But what he did was, he took the film we shot and he shipped it overnight to Chicago, or shipped it that same day somehow to Chicago. He got it to Chicago, he got a film lab to process it, and it got sent back to us the next day. And this is Dave Faust, just checking out the map. This is Dave again. And he found a movie theater, and he called him up and he said, listen, we just shot a film and we need to see some dailies. Can we watch it in your theater? And I don't know how, but he got somebody to say yes. Here's a can of film, processed film. Here's the Century Theaters. We just show up at like 10 o'clock in the morning with this film that has been overnighted to us. Here he's holding the can of film. There's nobody in this place except the guy who runs it or owns it. And we basically just walk into the projection room, mount up the film, and there we are, sitting in the movie theater. We literally had this entire theater to ourselves just for asking. This was really an amazing lesson for me. You can get anything if you ask for it and act like you deserve it. Because that's what this guy was amazing at. He would be like, we need this? Oh, we'll just go ask for it. And he got everything he ever wanted. And I would be like, but no, we can't, it's against the rules. Yeah, didn't mean anything. This is just from the actual instruction booklet, a little picture of the control panel, and I know it's very hard to read them up here, but it lists all the different pilots and the levels and things like that. Sorry, let me go back to video. So I just showed you, some of the footage that we shot. Now, this is some test footage that, of course, it's speeded up heavily. But this is basically test footage. You would be behind the plane. Let me just pause that for a second. So you'd be first person, so you actually look behind the plane. One thing I'll also mention is that the controls, you had two buttons on your control panel to roll the plane. So you'd be flying the plane, and of course the movie footage is coming at you, but you had the opportunity to roll the plane left or right. And you were also shot out of both the extreme sides of your wings. That's where your propellers would go. So they would kind of make a beeline in the distance, and that gave you the illusion of depth as well. But the banking in the normal levels, when the alien ships were firing at you, was, it helped you avoid their shots. In this level, the idea was you had to avoid hitting the trees. So you'd be flying along, and you'll see, let me run it again. Every now and then, a tree comes right up to the front of the screen and just holds for a frame or two. And when that happens, this was the beginning part of the level. Oh, sorry, this is still the test footage. It has the time code on it. But very shortly, I think we're going to switch to the actual game. And when we do that, you'll see, so he was shooting things like that, just kind of going up to a tree and stopping. And then in the editing, you'll see in a second what I did there. Yeah. So the trees he was going into would be on might be on the left side of the screen, the right side of the
I gotta
screen.
find a way out of here without hitting any trees.
So you'd have to bank your plane and swerve your plane to avoid crashing. If your plane was overlapping that tree when it hit, the front of the screen, then you'd be dead. And I want to say something else about the score here. You can hear the music. This guy Dave Zabriskie composed a John Williams-inspired score for this movie, and we actually hired a live orchestra to record it. This was like never done. I don't even know how we got it in our budget. It wasn't a large orchestra. I think it was like a 16-piece orchestra, maybe 20-piece orchestra. Normally you'd have 50, 60, I don't know how many pieces John Williams has. But we actually hired an orchestra of live musicians, and he composed a score for the entire game. And that's what you hear. He did an amazing job, we all thought. Okay, going to continue. So, here's another little example of the side-scrolling portion of the game. So some levels you would be behind the plane, first-person view.
I'll try to get inside and destroy the core.
Some versions of the game, you'd actually be sort of above the plane, looking down on it a little bit. Some versions were side-scrolling. The gameplay was generally the same. The alien ships were shooting at you, you were shooting at them. It was fairly simple gameplay, but you had the roll thing that could sort of come into play. And then there's a point in the story, about halfway through, where this particular pilot goes into the mothership.
Don't do it, Quicksilver. It's too risky.
I've got to try. It's the only way.
Turn back. That's an order.
It's too late, Big Daddy. I'm almost there.
We've lost him, sir.
She has such big eyes. She's so sad. We've lost him, sir. So anyway, the story actually took a little turn. So now he's in the mothership, and we had a new level of gameplay we have, which I'll show you in a minute. But of course, we also had to have a villain. So we hired this actor, and he was so phenomenal to be the villain. Here's his introduction.
About Quicksilver, sir. It wasn't your fault.
Captain Tracy, I'm taking over.
And that was it. And this guy was great. So again, little 10-second, the story advances in little 10-second clips. So let me just talk a little bit about shooting these control room scenes. I actually have some photos I'm going to show you here. Some behind the scenes photos. These actors were all just actors, other than the commander. These were actors we all found from auditions. And I couldn't tell you much about them other than this guy right here I ran into in Los Angeles when I moved to Los Angeles just like a few years ago, which was a phenomenal and rare thing for me. I couldn't believe it, but this guy's still acting. He's been acting all these years, and I reminded him of Us Versus Them. He was like, "Oh, that's right," and he asked for a copy of the video, which I got for him. By the way, I got to apologize for the video, the quality of the video. I wish I had my own copy of the Laserdisc, but I don't. I used to. It got lost somewhere. So I actually found this video on the internet. And it's not the best quality, but the actual quality when you're playing the game is actually much better than what you're seeing here. Again, just some behind the scenes, you can see all the lighting, and we hired a production company in Chicago to shoot this. So we did this on their studio, on their sound stage. They built this set for us. They built the cockpit set, which I have a picture of. Here's the dressing room. This is Rich Tracy, one of the designers. This is my friend John Hadelstadt, who played the commander. We hired the director. Sort of came with the project because we really didn't have the expertise to direct this, to actually